we are back with breaking news here. This new tape, apparently, of the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi has just been released. CNN Chief National Security Correspondent Jim Sciutto is with me now. And Jim, I know that there had been rumors or thoughts that perhaps he'd been killed. Is it him? And what does he say?
Well, the U.S. intelligence community, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, just moments ago telling us at CNN that, quote, they have no reason to doubt the authenticity of this new audio recording from the ISIS leader, though they caution it is not yet a final assessment. It's a 46-minute recording. It would break, if confirmed, a 10-month silence by al-Baghdadi, and in it you hear a leader here trying to urge on his troops, ISIS fighters who, as you know, and we've been reporting for months now, have been under enormous pressure. Their coalition, U.S.-led coalition airstrikes, loss of territory to Iraqi forces, U.S.-backed forces in both Iraq and Syria. So this, you hear the al-Baghdadi urging on ISIS fighters to stand up, stand firm, stand strong in the face of this, while at the same time taking some shots at the U.S. And Brooke, this is one of the reasons why the U.S. intelligence community believes this may very well be authentic. That's because he makes references to events that have only taken place in the last few weeks. For instance, he references North Korean threats to the U.S. and Japan. He references Russian military activity in Syria, the fact that Russia is still in Ukraine in defiance of the West. So all these things, because of that timely information, giving some confidence that this is in fact the ISIS leader. In addition, typically, Brooke, when you get an audio recording like this, what analysts do is they of course listen to the voice, and they have other recordings of his voice, and they look to see if there is a voice match. I'm told that that assessment is not complete, but as I said right at the top there, Brooke, that they have no reason at this point to doubt the authenticity of this.
Okay. As you get more, we'll bring you back on, and perhaps this will come up in the upcoming briefing there at the White House. I have to imagine it will. Jim Sciutto, stand by for that. The White House holding its briefing any moment now as millions of Americans are waiting for food, water, gas, etc., just to arrive to them. It has been 8 days since Hurricane Maria just shredded Puerto Rico, and help is so close. This is the insane piece of this. There are like 10,000 containers here holding vital supplies sitting right there in San Juan, but they're not going anywhere. At least the vast majority hasn't been so far, because of lack of fuel to get the trucks up and running to go on these impassable roads. Puerto Rico's governor says officials just can't locate enough drivers even to take these critically needed goods out to the people who need them. As we wait for this briefing to begin, I have with me a number of great voices here, including our chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, and CNN political commentator, Errol Louis, who's also political anchor for Spectrum News, sitting with me. So I don't know if you were just listening to General Honore with me a moment ago. I mean, he was saying, break the rules, this is BS. He was throwing orders left and right just based upon his own experience. And, of course, Katrina. All kinds of criticism has fallen, obviously, on the administration and the president specifically for waiting too long, not having a bold enough response. What do you make of this today?
Look, there's a lot of criticism. Some of it is justified. Some of it, I think, maybe is not.
Yeah.
I think if you take a step back, the federal government had been dealing with not one but two major hurricanes on the continental U.S.
Right.
Having said that, that's what the federal government is supposed to do. Is supposed to figure out when a place in the country or in the territory needs it. And clearly, a place like Puerto Rico, which already, because of the debt crisis and everything else, was in very dire straits with even the basic infrastructure. To give it the kind of help that it needed from within the island, would need the federal response. So I think it's pretty obvious that the federal government was caught flat-footed. The president himself, just even in terms of the appearance of giving help, was caught flat-footed. I mean, the fact that he tweeted umpteen times on the NFL, which is okay, fine, he's going to do that. That's his shtick, but not showing the same kind of leadership, or showing leadership, not the same kind, but leadership on Puerto Rico, you know, certainly sends a message to the world that he wasn't at the time that they needed him focused enough.
I was talking to a mother who we're going to air the interview next hour, who lives in New Jersey. Her son, Errol, was down in Puerto Rico helping his grandmother, and she hasn't spoken with them in 8 days. And I mean, she just threw tears at the end of this interview. I said, you know, what would you say to the president? And she said, please stop talking about kneeling or not kneeling and go get my son. Please treat this as though these are your children. She's frustrated.
Sure, and she has every right to be. Look, because of the nature of Twitter, we can look hour by hour and see what he was doing, what he was tweeting about, and sooner or later, CNN and other news organizations will do a timeline of what was happening in the Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico while he was doing all of this stuff. I mean, the whole NFL controversy happened at a political rally, so he'd already made one important choice, to be at a political rally rather than in the Situation Room trying to save 3.5 million Americans. So he's already kind of behind the 8 ball, and then you look hour by hour and you see more and more of the tweets about this political controversy. Then we see the president going to a political fundraiser for his re-election campaign at Le Cirque, at a fancy restaurant. And all the while, reports are coming out. I'm reporting, you're reporting, local stations in New York are reporting, everyone's reporting that there is an evolving humanitarian disaster on our hands. Members of Congress are standing in front of the cameras. The governor of New York took the National Guard, Apache helicopters, and others, some other elected officials, and went down there and came back and reported directly. So it's not as if the federal government didn't know that there was a problem. It's not as if the president didn't know. The president made some choices. He'll have to live with those choices. Things are going to be, I think, a little bit harder both for the federal government, both politically and logistically, because they got off to such a slow start.
Let me hit pause on this conversation and ask you to, pretty please, both of you stand by. I've got David Chalian also waiting in the wings in Washington, because David Chalian, moving off of Puerto Rico, we have some new pictures in of multiple presidents all hanging out together today. Was this today? What was this?
Yeah, this is the President's Cup golf tournament, I believe. This is a golf club in New Jersey. They're honorary chairs of this event, the President's Cup, and I think it's the first time that the honorary chairs actually decided to show up. But you're getting to see 42, 43, and 44
How about that?
all together there. And actually, you said apart from Puerto Rico, but these men have been part of an effort trying to raise big sums of money, as you know, with each hurricane. First Harvey, the President's Club got together, all of the living former presidents, the two not here, Jimmy Carter and George H.W. Bush, got together to raise funds. Then they added Irma to that effort, and now they've added Maria and the devastation in Puerto Rico as another opportunity for them to continue to raise huge sums of money to try to help people. So they actually have been working together for the last month on trying to do what they can with their notoriety, with their celebrity, with their unique position as former presidents to get as much money to the right hands as possible.
I mean, my thought bubble is, can you imagine 45 with those three?
Well, that's right. No. But my thought bubble is also just having I covered the Bush White House, and also the Obama White House from my perch on Capitol Hill, and they had issues very much like what we're seeing right now. Obviously, the most infamous is Katrina. I was covering the Bush White House, watched firsthand as they were very, very flat-footed, not understanding how the presidential role was so, never mind the federal government, which is obvious, but the presidential role is so critical. And then even Obama, when in the Gulf with the
oil spill.
The oil spill.
Oh yeah, that was.
On his face should say, I think it should be an address from the Oval Office, but in whatever forum it takes, to tell everybody these are American citizens. This is the equivalent. Puerto Rico is bigger than something like 20 states.
Yep.
I mean, if the state of Wyoming had no fresh water or power, everybody would understand that it was an emergency of the highest magnitude. This is no different in a way, and the president can and should focus the nation's attention on that fact.
Stand by. David Chalian, stand by. And we have General Honoris standing by as well. Quick break. We're waiting for this White House briefing to begin any moment now.
CNN, the most trusted name in news. This morning, more members of the president's cabinet coming under scrutiny for private flights on the taxpayer dime. CNN has learned that EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt used private and military jets instead of flying commercial for some work trips over the summer.
So this comes as President Trump did not rule out firing his Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price after Politico revealed that Price took dozens of private jet flights all in just a few months, all paid for by you, the taxpayer. Joining us now, CNN contributor and the former director of the Office of Government Ethics, Walter Shaub, who had an interesting tweet this morning. Let me read it. Watching CNN coverage of desperate Americans in Puerto Rico thinking about our champagne cabinet on luxury planes that could be taking supplies to them. We are all thinking about the people of Puerto Rico. They are at their wits' end, understandably, as our Bill Weir just reported for us. What's wrong with what these cabinet members are doing? Because it's not just Price. It's Mnuchin as well. It's three members of the president's cabinet.
Right. Well, it all comes back to the basic principle of public service, which is the core of the ethics program, that public service is a public trust. So every penny they spend of your money on one of these charter flights is money that's not going to something like the Puerto Rico disaster recovery after the hurricane. Apparently, though, they've pushed it, and in fact, it's really become somewhat widespread because you have Secretary Mnuchin, Administrator Pruitt, and Secretary Price under scrutiny right now. The House Government Oversight and Reform Committee, led by Chairman Trey Gowdy and Ranking Member Elijah Cummings, have actually launched an investigation. They sent letters to the White House and 24 different federal agencies demanding answers by October 10th. And one of the key issues in that investigation is going to be the level of responsiveness from the administration. We've had issues this year with the administration, particularly with letters from minority members, simply not responding, which is a very significant departure from the norms of the government.
What are the actual rules concerning flights for cabinet members? Because some of these flights, I think all of them, were in fact vetted by the various, legal offices inside their departments. So what do the rules say?
Right. Well, first of all, they have to get sign-off from the chief legal officer in their agencies, usually the general counsel. But of course, the general counsel works for them. And sometimes in a large agency, if you isolate yourself too much, you can become something of an echo chamber, and things that sound really ridiculous to the outside world, you can convince yourself are somewhat normal. So the basic rule is they have to travel by the most cost-effective method when traveling, around the world. Now, there are some exceptions, and it makes sense that the Secretary of Defense needs to be on a government jet. He's got significant security concerns that could respond to hostilities around the world at any moment. But it's more typical for other cabinet officials to travel by commercial air. And it's actually quite rare that they do otherwise. And in this case, it's become somewhat frequent, with Secretary Price running up about $400,000.
And one of those trips, just as an example, was to down to where his son also lives. He was speaking at a medical conference, had lunch with his son. Right. It's important to speak at a medical conference. There's probably a commercial flight that can get you there in time, right? The thing is, with Price, when he was a congressman from Georgia, he ripped into Democrats for doing anything like this. Let me read what he said to CNBC about House Democrats trying to spend $550 million on 8 passenger jets. This is just another example of fiscal irresponsibility run amok in Congress right now. That was not that long ago. Same guy who's now done it, what, 24 times?
Right. Yeah, and in fact, he's given us a wonderful phrase, because what he's doing is fiscal irresponsibility run amok. In this case, though, I would say a lot of the blame lies at the top. Now, President Trump has said he's not happy with Price, but I actually think Price's actions are the natural consequence of a bad ethical tone from the top, when you have a president not only not divesting his private properties, but traveling to them frequently at great expense to the taxpayer. And obviously he has to take the Secret Service with him, but he's also taking a number of White House officials and cabinet officials And every one of these trips they take to one of his properties almost every weekend, it seems, is just racking up an enormous bill for the taxpayers. So why would Secretary Price have gotten any other message from the White House except the idea that high office is a cause for enjoying perks? They seem to view these as rewards for having attained their position, when in reality the culture of the government is supposed to be one of service, where you travel very austerely and do everything you can to conserve the taxpayers' money.
Walter Shaub, great to have you with us. Thanks so much, sir.
Thanks.
The Republican health care bill, is it dead? The president doesn't seem to think so. He may not be watching TV quite as much as usual this week. Stay with us.